welcome to another video from Flash Jazz Cat. And what do we have here? Another Atari 800XL. This one in very, very yellow condition. But it's not here because it's gone yellow. It's here because having been upgraded by another community technician. I'll flash up on the screen the message that I received. It's a nice detailed description of what the problem is with the machine, which is always very, very helpful. And as you can see, the primary issue is a loud buzzing on the audio output. Now I've already took the screws out the bottom of the case here. The customer's also sent up his side 3 cartridge usefully with some COVOX files, and he complained that presumably from the point he got the machine back, there's a loud buzzing on the audio output. So let's turn the machine on anyway. It's the first thing we normally do, and see what we've got. So it's got a Sophia DVI on the back, which hasn't been attached to the back of the case. So I've just brought the DVI cable out the back of the machine there, and hopefully we'll get a picture, unless the monitor's gone completely to sleep, which it looks like it might have done. It's not even registering a picture. That's lots of fun. Because the the cable's fallen out the back. There we go. A nice simple explanation for that problem. Right, let's try that again. Here we go. We've got a DVI signal by the looks of things. Whoa! I don't know if you can hear that. I'll turn the volume up a little bit on the monitor. So that's what we've got coming out of the audio jack. I'll turn it down a little bit. Now if we have a look from the top, at the rear of the machine there, I'll turn it off for a moment and unplug the DVI connector. So if we look on the back here, I've got the audio source. It's plugged into this little gold 3.5-inch headphone jack on the back there. So that's where the noise is coming from. So let's have a look inside the machine anyway. I've already spotted as well when I first turned the thing on that the help key's a bit hit and miss. But the customer does say that he's attempted repairs on the keyboard, and it looks... Oh. Hello? It is, yes, speaking. Sorry there, I got interrupted by a phone call. So yes, so we'll unplug the machine and we'll lift the cover off. So yes, as I say, the keyboard has been repaired by the owner. I think he's replaced the Mylar, yes, with like an aftermarket one. So I'm surprised that there's a problem with the help key. It's intermittent. I had to really breathe the hell out of it to get it to work a couple of times so I could get into the ultimate setup menu. So I'll have to have a look at that. He's actually sent me another keyboard as well, separately, for an 800XL, which he's invited me to fix up as well if I can. But I think that just needs a new flex cable, so I'll just repair that in the normal fashion. So yes, we can see that all the RAM's been removed from the board here. So it looks like something very, very similar to the machine recently featured on the channel. So we've got repeaters in the corner here, we've got adapters, we've got the SRAM board. Where the hell is the SRAM board? So there's no RAM on the motherboard. Where's the SRAM board? Ooh, but this is handy. We've got a PokeyMAX. I can use that in troubleshooting another machine in a video that I haven't finished editing down yet. Oh yes! Because it says recapped 2023. Well, that's going to be a giveaway to the person who what the hell, what the hell is this? So we've got these. This is the PokeyMAX board here. Have I just accidentally pulled these off? So we've got the wire going to, so I'm assuming this is the ground wire here. That's unbelievably slack. It's not even gripping that pin at all. I don't think the DuPont connector's even pushed into the housing properly. What the hell? I can get the tweezers and see if I can push the thing in properly. The crimp connectors on this two-way housing here haven't, that metal part that you see there isn't the bit that actually pokes out and clips it into the housing. That is actually the bottom end of the connector. It's supposed to push right the way down, and it probably won't go right the way down because of the thickness of the wire. The wire is too thick to go into the housing. There we go. So that was the end of the connector. That's why it's not gripping onto those wires properly. And that one's just snapped in half completely. So I'm assuming the ground one was the same. So the person's crimped the DuPont connector onto the end of these wires, these fat wires, pushed it into the housing. It's met with resistance and appeared to latch over the little tab there that's supposed to hold it in, and they've presumably thought that it's fully inserted. Now this one, I'm assuming this one's okay. Right, so let's lift up this one here and see what we've got. Was this one fully pushed in? Sort of is, but it's not clipping on for some reason. I think the way the connector's been crimped, it's destroyed the little clip action. Yeah, maybe they have made contact. That'll be the address lines. That goes on the end 3, I can remember that from memory. But the housing's broke now anyway. Ugh. We'll replace that little 3-way housing there. Right, so I think what we better do here is we'll take this connector off completely. We'll do some forensics on this thing as well. So is the motherboard going to come out now? Because I want to see what's on the back of it. Oh, it's got some screws in it. Couldn't see the screws, it was black for some reason. Right, is that going to come out now? Ooh, yeah, there we go. And she's out. Right, so now we've got the motherboard out of the case, we can have a little look. I'm still perplexed about the base RAM on this computer. Ah, there it is. I knew there had to be an explanation for this somewhere. Right, so let's have a closer look at this. This is quite interesting. So I've took the repeaters off the adapters board at the back, and there hiding underneath is the SRAM board, and what the person has done is they've took the socket off the adapters board and soldered the SRAM board into the adapters. That's fair enough, I suppose. It makes it lower profile. It doesn't actually need to be that low profile, in fact, as I demonstrated in the machine I built the other week, because this will actually fit under the keyboard on an 800XL, even if the SRAM board's stacked up on top of it. But never mind, it's probably a little bit more sturdy, so that's okay. Interesting placement of the Ultimate 1MB as well. That's quite novel. It keeps the ribbon cables a bit shorter as well. It just means that securing the front of the board is a little bit more problematic, and that is definitely going to cause problems with certain keyboards. Certain XL keyboards are going to have a problem with that connector there. Obviously this one doesn't. So that explains why I couldn't find the base RAM on the machine anyway. Let's replace this little header, repair the audio connector. I just want to have a close look at this now. I'm going to cut it open. Yeah, there's a little shard of wire there on this contact here, which if you just push things in the right way, it'll actually short out. So I think a better idea would have been to individually sleeve those 3 wires. Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. Bits of wire here on the side of this contact can touch the longer contact at the top there. If the whole thing's squeezed, which it does become squeezed when you heat shrink the entire thing, but if you put sleeving over each individual pin, that wouldn't happen. So that's the problem there. Now whether or not, of course, that's actually responsible for the hum remains to be seen. It's a bit low, the hole there. It's actually below the level of the motherboard, but I think I've got a... Why is the board bent? It's like the motherboard's incredibly bent across the length of the machine as well. It's very it's up at the left, it's completely warped. Normally that tends to be heat damage from a heat gun. I'll show you how warped it is. It's particularly noticeable on the front. The front edge of the whole motherboard's totally bent along its length, and I know exactly from experience what can cause that is removing ICs and sockets with a heat gun. So I think there's been a tremendous heat cycle through this board and it's actually warped the board. And that's my theory anyway, because there's been a fair amount of socketing work going on in the middle of the board there. CPU area, Antic, pretty much all of the chips have been socketed. So I mean, if it turned out that somebody'd used a desoldering gun on the board, fair enough. But it looks to me like that board is warped because it's been attacked with a hot air gun and all the chips were removed. Well, in fact, if we needed any proof that a hot air gun was used, that's why the holes under the RAM are still full of solder, because the RAM was removed with a hot air gun. It wasn't removed with a desoldering. This RAM, which I'm assuming wasn't socketed, was just heated up. Hello there.
Hello there, it's Simon again.
Oh, Simon, right. Well, the second time I sent it, actually, what I did, I just replied to the test email. I didn't even change the title or anything, so the water will be running down the cladding anyway, and it's probably going under the membrane. No problem. Well, have a nice weekend anyway. It's been nice speaking to you again.
Likewise. Take care.
Alright then. Bye-bye now. Bye. Alright, so I was plagued with interruptions last night, actually phone calls from trading standards. But anyway, I'm back at the machine now and I didn't get to film a little bit of the work that I did. So to recap where we were, I wasn't very happy with this 3.5-inch jack audio cabling here. And the crimp connectors weren't properly making contact with the pins down here. So I took this off. And what I've done here, I found a perfect fit 3.5mm stereo audio jack there that I had in stock, and I've put it on. I've hot glued it to the board, but it's pretty solid actually because I cleaned the board. There was some old adhesive on the PCB there, so I scraped that off, cleaned it with IPA, so it was super clean. And I put this connector on with the motherboard actually in the case, so that the jack matches up with the hole that was already drilled in the back of the case. Absolutely spot on. It's perfect. Which I'll show you later on. I haven't heat shrunk this tubing here yet. It's a little bit wide this, but it does shrink down. I bought a load of it sometime last year and I think it's the wrong gauge, but it does shrink down fine anyway. But I didn't want to do that until I'd verified that the wiring was working out properly. So that's been replaced. So we've now got a new board mounted stereo connector on the back of the machine. Now I thought that might fix the issue. So it's certainly a lot cleaner, it's more sturdy. The other thing that I had noticed while I was working on this was that this ground wire here on pin, well I suppose the number from this end would be pin 4. Was actually connected to the 5-volt pin. That's a special pin assignment for the 1088XEL. I think it needed a 5-volt supply for some reason. I don't know why, but I never used that because I've never put one of these in a 1088XEL. But the ground wire was connected to the 5-volt wire, so that goes straight to the chassis on the stereo connector. There, for some reason, I thought that might have been the source of the problem. Because the owner was complaining, he thought it might be some sort of ground loop. And I think the reason actually that this was connected to the wrong pin is because, as we saw, these wires were just completely falling off. So maybe the owner just hooked it back up and maybe put it on the wrong pin. I don't know, but anyway, it was on the wrong pin when it came here because that ground wire was on the 5-volt pin. But anyway, if we go back to the other camera view and we'll turn it on and see what we get. There's another problem as well, which might actually crop up now. Yes, it is. This cable is flaky, so we've still got the noise on the audio there. It's terrible, and it doesn't matter whether or not I take that ground connection off or what. It doesn't make any difference at all. Now we've got an additional problem here, and I think I've tracked it down to the cable there. If I touch this cable, I'll lose the picture, and I think it's up this end of the cable. I don't know why or how that's happened, because this cable hasn't been shortened. What I'll do is, while I'm working on this machine later on, I'll fit this DVI connector to the back of the machine properly, if the owner's agreeable to that, of course. I'm assuming he would want that. Maybe he didn't want to try and cut the hole in the back of the case or what have you. I'll check with him anyway. But as a part of that, I'll completely redo this cable. That's a little bit annoying while we're trying to test the machine. But yes, we've still got the audio hum. So, what are we going to do about that? I'm just curious as to... Because the thing will function, the thing should boot and function. There can't be anything wrong with these audio wires now, so I'm going to take this three-way connector off completely, and I'm curious as to see what that actually does. So we'll try that. So that'll disable the stereo and what have you, because this is a stereo COVOX board. If we can actually get a picture, it would be great. And we have got a picture, and we've got oh, yeah, that's interesting. We've got audio, because I can hear the SIO coming through there, but the buzz is gone. So the buzz is gone just by taking those wires off. Let's have a closer look what's going on here. Right, so I'm going to double check. I think I'm right about the core on this board. The SC core, MO2 SC, which is stereo COVOX. Actually, I assumed when I first saw this machine, because of the way this is wired up, I didn't take too much notice of it at the time. But all these wires go straight to the CPU. Now, I'm going to bring up the PokeyMAX manual on the screen. Right, so here's the PokeyMAX user guide, and this will tell us what the pin assignments are for all the different PokeyMAX 2 cores. Because the PokeyMAX 3 just basically gets everything, and there's loads of pins on the back of the board, so you don't have to worry about these different pin assignments. But this one, the earlier board, it only had, what we got, 7 pins here. It's a bit of a shame actually, looking at the 7 pins, that we had to use one for right audio 5V on the 1088XEL. I'll zoom in a bit on this actually, it's a little bit small. There we go. So yeah, I always thought it was a little bit of a shame that we had to use that pin, assign it to the 1088XEL there, because what we've ended up with here. Right, so this is the one. I assumed this was the core that was on the PokeyMAX board when I first caught sight of this machine, and then I kind of forgot about it. Because on this particular core, this quad Pokey with COVOX, as I say, we've only got 7 pins here. Now, the quad Pokey with COVOX needs 3 address lines connected up to it. E4 is for stereo Pokey. E5 will be for the 3rd and 4th Pokey, presumably. And E7, I think, I might have it back to front, but anyway, that's obviously for your COVOX. Let's have a look. Would that make sense? Yes, E7's for COVOX. And E5 will be for the 3rd and 4th Pokey. So, with this arrangement, we lose the GTI in bell. So that's how the Atari makes the key click sound, for example. When you press a key, it actually comes from the GTI chip, and the audio output from the GTI is fed into the stereo mix here in most of the other cores. But of course, when we need 3 address lines, we haven't got a spare pin for that, so the key click, the GTI audio feed is sacrificed, which I always thought was a bit of a shame. We could have had everything here if it wasn't for this 5V pin, which only gets used in a small percentage of instances, I guess, but never mind. So this is what I thought the board had on it, but of course I flipped the board over, and what it's actually got on it is the SC core. In fact, this is the exact same chip, the MO2 chip with the SC core on it. So if we look here, of course, we've got E4, E7, and GTIE in, bell. But if we look at the actual motherboard, we can see here that we've got a 3-way wiring harness coming straight from those 3 pins, including the last one, so that one would be normally GTIE in. And it's actually going to... I'll use the multimeter because I can't remember what exactly which address lines are on which. So we know this one's A4, and I think A4 is there. Oh yes, there it is. So there's A4, there's A5, yep, that would be A6. So this one here is A7. So what we've got here is the wrong wiring. So this makes total sense when you think about it. So the GCIe audio feed that this particular core on this board is expecting to receive on that pin is actually wired to the A7 address line. So when we turn the computer on, right, so what you're actually hearing here is address bus data, address line 7. You are listening to address line 7. Which is kind of, well, it's cool, but it's not much use. And of course that noise is going to perpetuate all the time until you turn the computer off again. So I think we've solved the problem of why this horrible buzzing noise going on all the time. So what we're going to do now is we'll wire that pin to the proper pick-off point, which is somewhere down here. If we look at the instructions here, it tells you it's pin 15 of GTI. Sure. Oh, well, I've put the meter away. I should grab the meter again, and we will find a nice little handy place where we can grab pin 15 of GTIe. So 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, and I think there it is. Found it straight away. So we want to wire from the bottom of that capacitor straight over to there. So let's do that right now. And of course, none of the wires that have already got a crimp connector on them in the little pile here are long enough to actually reach, so I'll have to make one. I like to put a bit of solder in the connector actually, because it holds the wire in. And well, we already saw on this particular computer earlier in the video, the wire completely part company with the crimp connector that was on the end of it. So yes, I like the belt and braces approach here. This crimp tool is much better than the old one that I had, but I'm still having to nip the damn things up when I'm done. It's quite annoying. Right, that should be long enough. The rightmost wire, I'll just pop it out and try not to ruin the connector, because this is the second connector I've put on this little lot. I mean, this is a really bizarre wiring error, and I'm not gonna assume that this is as straightforward as it looks. The only way I can imagine that you would work on somebody's machine and leave this error, or have a situation that resulted in this error, is if this wasn't the same PokeyMAX that you put in the machine to begin with. You could certainly forget to lift the board out the socket, double check the core revision or the core type. Oh, that's the sort of mistake. But the thing is, when you turn the thing on, when you finish wiring it up and turn it on, you're going to get that horrible buzzing noise out the video port. So unless the person who put this in wired it up and then did not turn on the machine and test it subsequent to sending it back to the customer, the only other explanation I can entertain is that this was wired up for the quad Pokey COVOX PokeyMAX, and the PokeyMAX was put in later, and the PokeyMAX had a different core on it. I can't imagine any other reasonable explanation for this at all, I have to say. Right, so let's put this back in here, like so. Run that round half neatly, and it was the bottom of this one, wasn't it? So we'll just tuck this under here. This wire's probably a little bit too long actually. It's got a bit of a lump on it. Never mind, that'll do. Right, there we go. So let us test. I'll need a keyboard as well. Right, here we go. Come on. There we go. SIO noise. Key click. Fixed. Fantastic. So what I think I'll do now is I'll go away and I'll I'll ask the customer if he wants this Sophia connector put where the RF modulator is supposed. I'm assuming that. Oh shit! I've knocked that cable again. I'm assuming that was the idea because the RF modulator's been taken off. It's kind of odd. This computer actually, it's a little bit weird. It's like a half-finished job in a way. Right, so we're back with this machine after a little hiatus. Needless to say, I've done some off-camera work. Sunday today, but Deborah has actually gone into work because she swapped a shift so she could have an extra day off next week. So I decided to start bright and early at 9 AM on Sunday. The story has taken a very, very intriguing twist, which I will go into before we go any further. So a couple of days after this machine was sent in, and I didn't really immediately recognise the machine, and the owner hadn't made it plain in the otherwise very detailed email that he'd sent me, describing the problems that he was having and the immediate provenance of the machine, what had been done to it. I started to wonder if perhaps this wasn't the first time I'd seen it. And while I was looking around at information about the O2 fixer, SRAM, repeaters, etc., etc., I happened to alight on this thread on the Atari Age forum, and I started to suspect that this was actually the computer that I had just received. Now, in a forum post dated September the 30th, 2023, this third-party technician, who will remain nameless, I'm not going to embarrass him by revealing his identity. So he wrote, "I will try to improve the stability of Repeatus Ultimate 1MB Side 3.1 on 800XL on Sunday and Monday. We'll see if there are any surprises." So I clicked on this picture and had a closer look at it, and after comparing it with the machine that I had received, it became apparent that it was actually the same computer. So this is a job that I did back in, I think it was March 2022. With which the owner was absolutely delighted at the time, and why wouldn't he be, since he had a Side 3 cartridge back then before it was apparently eaten by his dog, and things worked well enough, notwithstanding the usual classic mode reboot things. As we can see here, this O2 fixer was not in the machine when I worked on it, so the O2 fixer has actually been put in since this third party got hold of the computer. For whatever reason, subsequent to that, he's completely bulldozed the board. So if we go down a bit further, the same day, this is the state the board's in. It's been completely stripped bare, and he's taken absolutely everything off it. So he must have put the O2 fixer in it, realised that it hadn't actually cured the problem, or what, I don't know. But for whatever reason, he's deemed it necessary to completely bulldoze the whole board, start again from scratch. And this wasn't as far down as it was taken. These machine sockets were removed as well with a hot air gun, it appears, and all the RAM sockets which were doing no harm here, were also removed, presumably with the same hot air gun, which resulted in a warp along the length of the board. And he started again from scratch, and as you can see, he's put things in a different position. We don't actually get to see any pictures of the machine after this point. The thread seems to tail off into nothing in particular. You would sort of expect that he'd come back 2 days later, showing pictures of what he'd done, and proclaiming that all stability issues had been fixed. And but I've searched in vain in that particular thread, and I can't find a thing, any kind of follow-up whatsoever, which is most surprising. Were it not for the fact I've now got the machine in my own hands, we would not know what the outcome of this was from looking at the actual forum. But of course we do know that it resulted in what I've actually got on the desk now, which required a great deal of attention just to get it to work in any remotely acceptable fashion. So I can only assume that the O2 fixer on its own wasn't enough to actually sort things out, because that was retroactively putting the machine with things pretty much the way I'd left them. It's hard to tell whether he put the SRAM board under the CPU after that, because it's not, I'm assuming it's not present in this picture. No, there's no SRAM in this machine at this point. Whether he tried SRAM in the machine and then realised that that still didn't fix the problem, so he thought that taking everything off and starting again from scratch was the way to go, I don't know. But it clearly accomplished absolutely nothing at all, because when the owner got the thing back, it still had the problem that it had when he sent it off to get it worked on. I think what we need to do is A, see if any of this work was actually necessary, and B, whether it actually accomplished anything. I even found photographs when I went back through my Google Photos. I found the photographs that I took, because I photograph pretty much every machine I work on, and I found the photographs that I'd taken and I'd sent the owner when I did the original work on this machine back at the beginning of 2022. The owner even posted a picture of it subsequently on social media. So yeah, he was very happy with it until such time as he tried a different version of the Side 3 cartridge in it, and that's where apparently his problems began. So most interesting indeed. Most interesting indeed. Right, so all that being said, I'm looking at this machine in a completely different light now, obviously. And every problem that I encounter has a completely different context. So previously we corrected the PokeyMAX wiring problem. Now the ironic thing is that when I first put this machine together back in 2022, that hole in the back there for the stereo jack, I drilled it, and I fitted a connector exactly like this one to the motherboard rather than to the back of the case. So obviously it's become clear now that the owner, this must have fallen off at some point. I'm assuming this was one thing that wasn't removed when the computer was sent to the third party, but in any case it fell off. Fair enough, it fell off, and the owner actually fitted this. But obviously I've had a very, very interesting discussion with him at the weekend, to say the least. But I'll try and make sure that it's as secure as I can, because maybe that's a bit of a weak point. It's attached to the board with hot glue. Actually, thinking about it, when I've put it back on here, I should have drilled holes for the legs and soldered the thing to the board. I think that's what I've started doing now, so I don't know why I didn't do it here. But I might do that later on anyway. That would be a fairly easy job and probably well worthwhile. So anyway, I corrected the PokeyMAX wiring problem. We've got no buzz on the audio now. But anyway, first job I did this morning was, as per the owner's request, to fit the DVI connector properly and cut a hole for it in the back of the case, which I've done. That's turned out quite nicely. And I've secured the DVI connector daughter board to the motherboard here in the usual fashion. Now you might remember earlier in the video, all I had to do was touch the ribbon cable between the Sophia and the actual connector board here, and the picture would drop out. So I thought I might just be able to, as I was going to reroute this cable anyway and make it a bit less overly long, I thought I would trim the end. It's possible to take these micro match connectors off and salvage them, but I didn't really want to do both ends of the cable if I could avoid it, so initially I just shortened it at this end, because this seemed to be where the problem was. If I tapped the cable at this end, the picture would drop out. So that's what I tried first with this, the original cable. But it didn't work. I put it back together and it was still flaky. So this is brand new cable here, and I managed to salvage the micro match connectors off the old cable. It's possible to do that. Maybe it'd be worth having some of these in stock as well, but I haven't at the moment. So that's done now. So that's Sophia sorted out. And the next thing was, if we put this out of the way for a minute, the owner sent me in the box, as you can see we've got evidence of work here. There's a mess. Sent me this case lid as well. You might also remember that the original top case of the computer and its original keyboard, I noticed that the Held key wasn't working properly. It's had a new Mylar put in it by the owner, but it's not working quite right. But anyway, what we decided to do, because he wanted me to fix this keyboard, this is a Mitsumi keyboard. They're quite nice actually, got quite a nice feel. but it had no flex cable on it at all. It had completely fallen off as the Raptor do. They do degrade, and sometimes they can snap clean off at the board end, which is exactly what happened to this one. And I previously said to the owner that when I haven't ordered the somebody on the Atari Age forum managed to find the a 25 way flex cable that would be a pretty much like for like replacement of the original cable, but I haven't sourced them yet, and for the longest time I can remember I've been doing things this way, which is to take the original flex cable off and replace it with a handmade DuPont connected ribbon cable. It's 24 way. You can't seem to get 24 way housings, so it's a 20 way plus a 4 way, and this is the way I do it. But I said to the owner, if I do this, if this is the way I repair the keyboard, of course it won't fit into a standard machine. So at his suggestion, we've paired this keyboard with this machine now. So this is going to be the keyboard for this machine, and the keyboard with the new Mylar in it. Once I've had a look at that and figured out what's wrong with it, he's going to have that as a spare keyboard that he can put in any standard 800XL. But of course, since I've had to install this male pin header in place of the original flex cable connector to suit my modification here, the owner understands that this keyboard is now belongs to this motherboard, if you like, because you can't interchange them with anything else. So when I was working on this keyboard anyway, I stripped it down. They're quite the Mitsumis are nice keyboards, but there's a lot of parts in them. There's a lot of springs and flexible contacts and carbon things, so you got to be very careful taking them apart. These screws tend to strip. That's why I've got hot glue on this strap, this ground strap here. But anyway, cleaned it all up, put the new cable on, put it back together loosely, and the thing is that these keyboards won't work properly until you've got all the screws in, or as many as I can get in. Actually, there's a few I haven't been able to put in because they're completely stripped, the actual holes. Although of course when I do put the screws in, I do back them up first until they click into the thread, but that didn't help here. Some of these are just completely stripped. So we could try and fix them, but the thing is, the keyboard, it now works perfectly, but I did have to do a bit of extra work on it because there was a couple of springs, a couple of keys weren't registering properly. The delete key, I think it was the reverse video key, felt really strange. It was making a strange noise, and I took it apart and it actually had a non-standard spring in it. So I think somebody's been in here and tried to fix it. Fortunately, I've got so many keyboards lying around, and some of them are obviously incomplete and messed up and unrepairable, and I've actually got a couple of these keyboards missing keys, missing all sorts of bits and pieces, missing flex cables, so I was able to dive into that one of the spare keyboards and take what parts I need to get this keyboard working properly. And so now this keyboard is now working perfectly. It just needs a little bit of a clean up. In fact, the top case needs a clean up in general, but I'll discuss with the owner what he feels like having done to that. It would be quite nice to use mate this top case with this bottom case, rather than just transplant the keyboard from this case into the other one. But of course the bottom case is very yellow, whereas this one isn't, so we'd probably want to do something about that. So obviously I go to, after having tested everything, established that the keyboard works, I go to actually put the keyboard in this top case, put the motherboard back in the bottom case, and install everything and set it up so that we can test it properly and have the machine fully assembled. But unfortunately what I found is that the case won't actually shut properly at this right hand edge, and I couldn't figure out why that was at first. I thought it was perhaps the actual keyboard header, but of course what I do is when I've put the straight header pins on here, I actually bend them at about a 45-degree angle. Stop clawing the carpet, you little bastard! Oh god, these bloody cats! I can't get a minute's peace with you since we moved into this house. Just absolutely non-stop. If it's either phone calls or bloody cats. Get out. Go on. Bloody shitheads. Sorry about that. I'm going to have to keep this office door closed 100% of the time just in case he wants to come and go. Sonny. Right, where was I? I've completely lost the thread. Oh, God. Racing up and down the stairs. Yes, anyway, so the case won't shut, and of course I've put the connector at 45-degree angle. Well, of course, the reason the case won't shut is because of this here. The original keyboard, here it is. It was I think, are these a Stackpole? Is it written on here? There we go, Stackpole keyboard. There's the original keyboard with the replacement Mylar, but the keyboard's got problems, and of course this needs the original connector on the motherboard, which it's no longer got because we have modded it for the other keyboard. So the Stackpole keyboard's pretty slim at the back edge there, so if we compare it with the Mitsumi keyboard, there's actually not that much difference. I'm quite surprised actually, now I come to look at the thing. So what is it that's actually blocking on here? Can we shut the lid with the original keyboard? Actually I was gonna say that the keyboard swaps made the bloody keyboard, the case not closed properly, but yeah, actually in both cases. So that when the computer originally arrived, the keyboard, the top case must have been forced down because there's a gap there. It must have actually been forced down such that the case is a bit bent. So it's not actually because of the keyboard swap itself, because both these keyboards have got a very, very similar rear profile. They're both blocking on this here, which is the OS-ROM IDC header for the Ultimate 1MB. Now, as you'll have seen from the photographs I've flashed up on the screen before of how this computer was originally put together back in 2022 by me, the Ultimate 1MB was over here at the back of the machine on the left hand side. Now one thing that does introduce obviously is a longer cable run for the OS-ROM cable in particular, not so much for the MMU cable. The MMU cable with the board in this position isn't really any shorter than it would have been had the board been over this side. The MMU cable's going all the way under the board there, wrapping around the back and coming over the top. So you've saved nothing by moving the MMU cable. Why is this so tall? So this has got an extra socket under it with another couple of wires coming off it going to... right, so this is, he's taken external select off an extra socket under the MMU, and this green cable here, where does this go? Oh, well, I'm getting off the beaten track here anyway. The point being that the MMU cable would be more or less the same length going this way. We can I'll flash the picture up on the screen, you can compare it for yourself. Maybe it was a bit longer, but of course the OS-ROM cable is significantly shorter in this position over on the right, there's no question about that. But the problem is that by rotating the Ultimate 1MB like this, and you can't really put it any further back because he's got a screw going through the motherboard, and there's not really any way to... There's no board underneath there to put the screw any further back. So... oh dear God. Stay calm. So he couldn't put it any further back, so he's put it as far back as he could. So the thing was so unstable when it returned home. Whether it went across the English Channel or the North Sea or not, I don't know, I haven't asked. But when it came home, this was so flimsy in the opinion of the owner that he's put some sort of sticky pad or something on the top of the OS-ROM adapter to stick it down. Of course, it's come off. So there's this ingenious little pad thing on the side of the cartridge pylon which goes underneath the Ultimate board and stops it from being pressed down when the lid is closed. In fact... yeah, God. I wouldn't object to actually soldering this hearting connector straight to the adapters board, because he's already soldered the SRAM board direct to the adapters board. I wouldn't object to taking the socket off there, solder that hearting connector straight onto the board. That'll allow us to drop the height of the Ultimate 1 megabyte by about 5 millimeters, and that should be quite enough to allow this to clear the back of the keyboard quite comfortably. I think that would be a good idea, because other than that we're going to have to do something really drastic. I think this Ultimate 1 megabyte, before I got my hands on it, it had the sideways open pin arrangement, right angle pin arrangement that Loader pioneered a few years ago for some reason. And of course the first thing I did whenever I got one of those boards was to take that thing off and put the enclosed straight headers on the board. Ugh. So anyway, yeah. So I don't want to start taking these off again, because they've already been removed once, or what was there previously. So I think that's what we're going to have. That's probably yeah. That's probably what we're going to have to do. It's going to be the simplest fix here, because I'm not comfortable wedging everything into the case like that, especially when this repeater arrangement here is relatively unsteady. The reason that the machine was sent off, as we've already gone through, was to get the side 3 problem sorted out, which I'm going to now embark on trying to reproduce before attempting to fix it. And so none of the work that was done, so we've got the warped board here. The board's badly warped, as we've said, because it's been attacked with a hot air gun. The RAM was socketed when it left my house. I didn't put the sockets in, I don't think. I think it was already socketed. So why on earth, having put the SRAM board in the machine, do you feel the need to remove the empty RAM sockets as well with a hot air gun? Obviously it was removed with a hot air gun because there's still solder in the holes. And it was obviously removed with a hot air gun because the bloody board's warped to the tune of about 10 degrees along its length. So it's up at the back, it's up at the front, and when you push the thing straight, when it's sandwiched between the two halves of the case, the back tends to come out. So getting these connectors aligned properly at the back of the machine was a complete fucking nightmare. But yeah, why take the sockets off? Why put the board through an extra cycle of heat? And you can see here that the board's actually started to blister and delaminate under the U11 DRAM chip, which is the third one from the top, owing to the enormous amount of heat involved. I mean, I'm assuming you didn't have a desoldering station. I mean, that ZD915, how much was that? About 80 quid or something, as far as I can remember. But well, maybe you don't have a desoldering station, so if you're actually forced to remove chips and sockets with a hot air gun, so heating them up till the solder goes soft, and then you're just picking them off with a pair of pliers or a pair of tweezers or something, why bother taking the sockets off the board? Just leave it alone. So the third party, instead of just installing the O2 fixer, wiring it up to the Ultimate 1 megabyte when it was over here, putting the SRAM board in the adapters, closing the case and then leaving it at that, completely bulldozed everything off the board, and then put in the O2 fixer and the SRAM and moved everything around, fucked up wiring the PokeyMAX board, sent the machine back, and apparently when the owner got it back, it was no better than it was when he sent it off. If anything, when it came back, it was actually worse than it was when it went out, because not only did it now have a constant buzzing noise coming out of the stereo output from the PokeyMAX because it was wired up wrong, the board was warped, and the side stability issue still wasn't fixed by any of this stuff. The O2 fixer and the SRAM, moving everything around, stripping it down, recapping the board. According to the owner, none of that made any difference at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to address the problem here and now on the desk. So the first thing we're going to have to do is try and reproduce the issue that the owner describes, and then we'll see if we can come up with maybe a different way of trying to fix the issue. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm soldering the adapters rear board directly to the motherboard. So I've took the old OS ROM and basic sockets off to get them out of the way. There was a big bypass capacitor that was blocking this, so I've put that on the bottom of the board, like so. Plenty of room for it underneath the board, so that's no problem. So that's how it's going to go together. That's going to drop the height of the repeaters by about 5 or 6 millimeters, and that'll allow us to drop the height of the ultimate 1 megabyte by 5 or 6 millimeters, and then the case will be able to close. So it's Monday now, and having showed you the keyboard and stuff, I spent a bit of time yesterday trying to track down and replicate the side 3 stability issues that the owner said had started to blight the machine. Now, when I built these upgrades into the machine in 2022, the owner had a side 3, not a side 3.1, but apparently his dog ate the side 3 cartridge. No, it's not an excuse, true story apparently. The dog ate my side 3, and so he went out and he bought another one, and of course by that time, this probably was in 2023, because as I think I've already covered in another video, the timeline of the side 3 cartridges. I got the prototype side 3.1, or a pre-production board, in September 2022. So we're talking about the better part of a year probably after I actually sent the original machine back to him. He gets this side 3.1 cartridges, which is what we've got here in our hands, and then he said he started to experience issues. As I say, he was quite happy over and above the various things you've got to work around when you've got repeaters and ultimate 1 megabyte in the machine. He seemed to be quite happy with it prior to that, but apparently when he got side 3, that's when his problems started. Now I do remember chatting to him about this around about the time, and I think what we agreed was that it was some sort of O2 problem. The symptom that he was experiencing apparently was playing back music files in the side 3 player, because I added that functionality to the player at some point. Apparently the files would start to play, but they'd fail after about 30 or 40 seconds and then just jump straight back to the loader, leaving the rest of the file unplayed. So that ostensibly is the whole reason that he ended up sending the computer to this third party, because after a period of discussion it was decided that the O2 fixer and the SRAM board might help the situation. Now, of course, neither of which were installed in the machine to begin with. So off it went, and when it came back, apparently the side 3 situation hadn't changed one bit. Now, I didn't test the side 3 playback. I should have done this, of course, before I even touched the machine. I should have tried to replicate the problem that the owner's talking about with music playback, but of course I didn't. So I set about testing COVOX files anyway, trying to reproduce this bug, and I couldn't, and I still can't so far. Everything seems to work fine, apart from the fact that COVOX files are totally silent. I'll show you. Right, so here's the folder full of COVOX files that the owner's got. Now, what I found last night when I was looking at these, this was very interesting. It's like the blind leading the blind, this actually. So the COS files, like that one at the top, that is a stereo COVOX file. PDM is a pulse density modulated file. PDS is a stereo pulse density modulated file. So both those PDM, PDS files play through the regular audio, stereo audio or mono audio through the Pokey chip, or the PokeyMAX in this case, and the COV files are mono COVOX files. Right, so it all gets incredibly confusing, because when I tried it, the stereo COVOX files, I'll play one here. I won't play too much because I'll probably get a copyright strike. But stereo COVOX plays. Now that stereo COVOX file will play all the way through, no problem at all. Likewise with the PDM files and the PDS files. Now the ones that I had problems with, and I'll show you now, was a mono COVOX file. So here we've got 4 non-blondes track, and the data's clearly coming off the card. We can jog using the jog bar backwards and forwards. So I'm not seeing any problems whereby the file will crash, as it were, or playback will fail. And pause it there. I need to add joystick control to this, by the way. I still haven't done that. It was asked for a long time ago. But yeah, but what we're not getting is any sound. So we've fixed the buzz, but we're not getting any sound. So that was really, really puzzling. So what I did was I took this cartridge and this card and I put it in my 600XL that's got a PokeyMAX 3, and the mono COVOX file worked. and then I put it in the NTSC 800XL that's got an identical PokeyMAX 2 with the same core, the SC core, and the mono COVOX file played there as well. So I'm starting to think there's a problem with the PokeyMAX in this machine. We already fixed one problem with it. So I had a look anyway, and guess what I found? So you might remember what we had here. So that's the A4 pin. Is this machine off? I just checked. So that's the A4 pin there. That's A5, A6 and A7. So what we originally had was A7 wired up to the GTI audio in pin here at the right hand edge of the pin header, and that was what was producing the buzz. Now what I missed at the time, and he said firing the soldering iron up, is that of course this is A4, A5, A6 and A7. Well, the A7 pin, which I disconnected from this board, that's actually supposed to go to the next pin along, A7, not A5. So we've got A5 going to the pin where A7 is supposed to be. And that's why the COVOX doesn't work. Oh god. It's becoming clear to me that whoever wired this up and put A4, A5 and A7 on these three pins here believed that this PokeyMAX board had a completely different core on it, because that is a legitimate wiring plan for, I think it's a quad Pokey and COVOX board. Yeah, that would be it. So if the PokeyMAX had quad Pokey and COVOX flash to it, that would work and it would be fine. But of course we wouldn't get any GTI audio in the stereo mix. But that's not what's on this board. So even if you didn't know what core was on the board, you'd immediately know that there was something wrong, because you'd have a loud hum coming to the speakers and none of your COVOX files would work. So I'm at a bit of a loss here, to be quite frank with you. At a bit of a loss. I don't know whether... This whole machine strikes me not so much a technical endeavour as a piece of performance art expressly designed to create entertainment when I eventually get hold of it again. That's the only possible explanation that I can come up with here. That it's all a big ruse. I'll get a bit of flux on this pin. That'll do for now. Right. Oh, that wire's absolutely terrible, actually. Hate it. No, that's a bit better. I'm going to redo that later on. I don't like it at all. Anyway, it's connected. It's not sure to do anything. So let's put the lid back on. Lid, which goes down nicely now. Oh, right. Let's try that experiment again. It takes so long for this TV to sync to the DVI signal. There's only one thing I don't like about this TV. I absolutely love everything else about it. It's brilliant. It's the one to get if you've got retro machines, but by God, it takes ages to sync to certainly the Sophia DVI. Right, let's go back into here. Because pressing the L key for some reason doesn't seem to run the loader. Pressing the L at power up, I don't know, it's because the splash screen's been turned off. That shouldn't make any difference. I'm going to turn this back on, you know. Power on is reasonable. Let's see if it'll work this time. I don't know if it's something to do with the fact that the Repeatus core comes up. I'll try it again. Yeah, that works. So we'll leave the splash screen on, just on power up, because that's enabling us to run the loader when the computer turns on. I don't quite know why that is. It should just work even with the splash screen turned off and the L key held down, but we've got a lot of boot up activity going on this machine, so the timing of it is probably crucial. Right, so what was the file that was playing that was silent? It was 4 non-blondes, what's up? Is anything different? Well, we'll try that one first. I mean, we're not going to play much of it anyways. I'm not going to start hunting around for music that I like. Right, let's try it. Ah, there we go. We'll scan forward to avoid copyright strikes and right, okay, so that plays now, so we've fixed COVOX. Now the question that I became haunted by last night when I was looking into this is, why were stereo COVOX files playing back on this machine? impossible because there was no COVOX hardware. The fact that our address line was wired up wrongly meant there was no addressable COVOX registers anywhere in the memory map whatsoever. Now I should point out, of course, that the side 3 loader is PokeyMAX away. And COVOX is one of those annoying upgrades that normally, on its own, you can't detect it in software. So you actually have to manually tell the software where the hardware is. But PokeyMAX has a feature register, and hopefully the simple stereo will follow this protocol pretty closely. So when the side loader detects a PokeyMAX, it asks PokeyMAX what hardware it supports. Obviously with the PokeyMAX 2 we've got different cores, so we can't guarantee that everything's present and correct. It asks PokeyMAX via its feature register, its capability register I think it's called, what it's got, and that register tells us that COVOX is present and it tells us the address. So that's why the loader was able to detect the COVOX base address on this machine even though the wiring was incorrect and A5 was going to the A7 pin. But of course this didn't allow the COVOX playback to work because those registers still weren't addressable. Likewise, if we go into the system here, now I've updated the plugin. For some reason the third party that worked on this machine, and I remember the third party who worked on this machine talking to me about this at the time. He assembled, well, it was said wrote, no, he assembled, because I wrote them, the plugins for this system, for the Ultimate 1 Megabyte. He created some sort of custom blend, and if I remember correctly, I can look back through the video, we'll have it on the screen at some point. He had the Side 3 plugin, the Repeaters plugin, the Stereo plugin, and the COVOX plugin, which is even more baffling. Because we've got, if we discount the fact that Sophia plugin was missing for the time being, which isn't it, you don't have to have it, but it's nice to have if you've got Sophia in the machine. If we discount that for a minute, we've got a PokeyMAX 2 with a stereo COVOX core with no hardware connection to the Ultimate 1 Megabyte whatsoever. So the reason those pins, if you look at the stock Ultimate 1 Megabyte firmware, i.e. the one I wrote, but it's got support, the same original support for Simple Stereo and Candle's COVOX board. There's two settings in there, COVOX and Stereo. So that's what that plugin's for. It's not for software controlled PokeyMAX feature sets. That's why I wrote the PokeyMAX plugin, the PokeyMAX 2 plugin here. Which scales up to support PokeyMAX 3 if I remember correctly. It's very confusing. I'm coming back to this after not having touched any of this stuff for about 5 months. That's my excuse. Anyway, so these are the plugins we need here, and I flashed them last night. So what we end up with here is we've still got the Repeaters plugin. Oh, for the Repeaters plugin as well. There's another thing I forgot. The third party had put the Repeaters plugin on the machine, which controls the repeaters via one of the I/O pins on the Ultimate 1 Megabyte. But he had the repeaters ground pin connected to the wrong pin. So the repeaters setting in the BIOS did absolutely nothing at all, and when the owner, who thought he had repeaters turned off completely because he had this setting set to disabled, the repeaters was actually still running because it was on a different pin that was permanently set to ground. Oh God. So I've fixed that now, and your repeaters is now on the right pin, and when I turn it off, it turns off. So you get no core loader or anything like that. It's completely off the bus. I've got it enabled at the moment. It's in classic mode because I think that's useful for testing purposes. So anyway, I've added the Sophia plugin as well. So we can set the DVI resolution and whatnot here, right in the firmware. So there we go, you can test that. If you don't like it, we can just get back out of it again. We'll stick with this one because there's a funny shimmer. When I select higher resolutions on this particular monitor, there's a shimmer on the picture, which is bloody hell. Anyway, so we can access all those settings. Now we've got the PokeyMAX settings here. And this was actually set to single Pokey when I first installed the plugin. COVOX sample enabled, that was turned off. So there we've got all our PokeyMAX settings, or most of our Sophia settings, and our repeaters setting, all of which now work. Isn't that wonderful? But anyway, getting back to the side 3 loader. Looks like we're all having a bad time. We all have bad days from time to time, of course. Now what I found last night, that, as I say, why were stereo COVOX files playing and mono COVOX files weren't playing? Ah, well, there was a very good reason for that, because there was a bug in the COVOX player and the stereo COVOX files were somehow being played back as PDM files or PDS files, stereo PDM files. The fact that they were even recognisable as music is quite remarkable, but I guess we're talking about a similar data set but actually different, so the values that are written to the COVOX registers will be different, quantitatively different to what's actually written to the Pokey chip when we're playing PDM and PDS files. But that's why we were getting sound out of the COVOX stereo files, because they weren't even hitting the COVOX registers, they were hitting the Pokey registers. But the mono COVOX files, they were hitting the COVOX registers, and that's why we were getting no sound. So I fixed all that now. Altera came to the rescue last night. I haven't done any coding since July 2023. Nothing, absolutely none whatsoever. So I've come back to it in January or February 2024. There's a new version, the new test version of Altera out. That's great. The debugger's a little bit nicer. But I'm looking at this 40,000 lines of loader code in Eclipse Woodson IDE. And anyway, I managed to track the bug down. I think it was when I implemented stereo for both of these file types. So basically the frequency's halved on each channel. And you have to encode the file to suit the playback type, so it's obviously dispatched on the basis of the file extension, which makes sense. But yeah, oh, what an absolute clusterfuck that was. I mean, I'll show you. Right, so here we are. This is the source folder for the I've got umpteen different versions here, development versions. I started a big rewrite back in the middle of last year. I think that's in that folder there. So here's the current maintenance version, if you like, and there's the files. So this file pdm.s, this used to contain all the playback code and everything, but I moved that to RAM about a year and a half ago. It was more expedient. It's potentially I can't remember why it's better, but it's better anyway. So here we go. This is where the files are dispatched to. So when you open a PDM, a PDS, a COV or a COS file, it comes to one or other of these little spots here. So if either of the files are stereo, it comes here, and we set the carry flag and we skip the next byte. And if they're mono, COVOX or PDM, it comes here. I could have written this in a little bit more of an illustrative way, I suppose. You could have had 4 different entry points, but well, what's the point? It just takes up more space. So the bit 7 of stereo PDM flag, which is shared between both file types, so it's not very descriptive, but then again COVOX support was added later on. That's just a stereo flag for either file type. So if it's stereo COVOX or stereo PDM, it comes here with bit 7 set, and if it's mono of either file type, this has bit 7 clear. And then I reset the COVOX flag. Well, that was actually missing, so I think it was reset somewhere else, but just for belt and braces I'm going to clear it anyway. And then this bit here interrogates the file type flag in the actual FAT directory entry. Now what I had here was a comparison, again because stereo was implemented after the fact. I checked if it was a COVOX file, and if it is, I set the COVOX flag, but this bit here was missing, so I forgot to check to see if it was a COS file, which is a stereo COVOX flag, and then set the corresponding flag. So this wasn't getting set if the file was a stereo COVOX flag. So the result of that being, anyway, if it was a stereo COVOX file, it was just getting played back as a PDM file through Pokey. So where's the code bits here? We've got them. So what happens here? So this is commented out now. the code's over here. So these chunks of code here, these are the actual playback sections. So this code here, this is for Pokey, so these addresses don't change. Now if it's COVOX playback, the first thing that happens here, that's probably one of the reasons it's in RAM, of course. The reason this is in RAM is because this little code stub here is relocated to suit the address of the COVOX hardware, and then it's iteratively copied into the heavily unrolled player code in its relocated state. So we've got the offset there. There was actually another one I found somewhere up here. Where is it? Fix up player. So this is the fix up code where the relocation happens before we actually start to copy the code stubs into the player code. So the playback code is essentially machine generated at the time of playback. So COVOX address table is a table of addresses here, and now these are all the different known decoding addresses for the COVOX hardware. That's non-existent, no COVOX, and then we've got another 6 different ones. Well, of course, this is the one that's supported by PokeyMAX, but there's all sorts of different ones. And of course, if the player isn't able to auto-detect the COVOX address, which it almost never will be able to unless it's in the PokeyMAX 2 capability register, you can the option will be grayed out and you can set it manually. Now, it'll remember the address of your COVOX hardware, so every time you go to play a file you don't have to set it again. So anyway, this fix up code here gets the COVOX base address from that table based on the value of the actual setting in the loader settings, and it fixes up that little code stub before it starts to distribute said code throughout the player code, you see. Now this is the least significant byte, that in the accumulator we've got the most significant byte. So the LSB's in X, the MSB's in E. Now of course with stereo COVOX playback, which we can just simply ignore if it's not needed, we fix that up as well, and we do that by taking the LSB, bumping it by 1 and storing it at the next behind the next instruction where it hits the stereo or the right COVOX output. And I think I had also stored X at the left upper address as well instead of E, so that was another bug as well. So there you are, see, full clarity there. But yeah, that's all fixed now. So I've made an updated version. That's what's actually running on the owner's cartridge. But of course it still didn't work until I fixed the wiring problem on the PokeyMAX. So what you should find anyway when I get this released, it's not what I was hoping to release this year. I was kind of hoping that I'd have a heavily rewritten version of the loader that had yet more exciting new features on it, but that hasn't happened. I haven't had any time, just with moving house and stuff. Hopefully I'll get to that later in the year. But at least now what you should notice with this stuff fixed is a marked improvement in the quality of certainly stereo COVOX file playback, at least, because of course that was being played back straight through the Pokey chip. I don't think there was any other problems, and I mean, it was not like it's not a fatal bug, because if it had been a fatal bug it would have been easy to spot actually, but the fact that the music files were playing back fine was a real that was a red herring, because when you hear music you think, oh well, it works. But of course I had to use Altaria to dig into the playback and set some breakpoints to see where the actual data was being written to. And of course it was being written to the wrong address. It was being written to the Pokey chip when it should have been written to the COVOX registers. And of course we had that other bug as well. Occasionally we got the right speaker data being written to somewhere way outside of the COVOX hardware range. So that's fixed now anyway. So what I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick my SD card in, which is exactly the same make as the customer's card. It's just double the capacity. I can't even find my 32GB SanDisk card. That's how bad it is here. There's stuff just distributed all over the place. It's a real headache trying to find anything. I've just managed to amass around my immediate space here just enough tools and parts that I need to actually get jobs done. But anything out of the ordinary, it's a complete nightmare. I'm going to need to... I'm still about halfway through the work queue here, but I'm going to need to just stop and devote some time to putting the shelves up in the spare room there. I'm going to have to watch what I'm doing as well, because you can't really see it here. I'll flash a photo that I took when I was in bed, but it looked a lot worse this morning. There was a lump sticking out the side. I haven't been to the doctor yet about this, but this was a problem that first flared up nearly 2 years ago, and then it kind of went away. It looks like it's arthritis in this part of my left wrist here. And it was really flaring up last night when I was just twisting the ends of wires and doing crimping and stuff like that, dremeling the case out and using a file. It was really flaring up, and it was quite nasty this morning, and I'm starting to get pain down here as well. So I'm going to have to be careful what I'm doing here. I should really go to the doctors about it and see. I mean, it's probably not much they can do. Since we moved in here, actually, nothing's been right. I mean, this finger hasn't turned out quite as well as I thought. I'm splinting this thing on a night time again now for all the good it's doing, but time will tell with that. It's got the lump on the top. It's sore if I bump it off anything. This is flared up again, and I had a horrendous chest infection over Christmas and New Year, and that coincided because I just had, back in August, expensive periodontal cleaning of me teeth, and everything looked great. I mean, it was like a new dawn of rude dental health, as I think I put it to the periodontist the last time I saw her. But when I was in the midst of this horrendous cold over Christmas, which was followed by an even worse cold that went straight on my chest, I started to get toothache all over the right side of my mouth with no explanation whatsoever. Went back to the dentist, he had a look, said there was nothing wrong. Go back to the periodontist, you're due for another cleaning. Had that cleaning, another 115 quid, and I'm still getting all sorts of pain. So I'm going to have to go back to the dentist again, get an x-ray, see what's going on there. So, yeah, so we've got this house now, and I'm falling to bits. Completely. Totally falling to bits. So I'd better try and make hay while the sun shines before I become completely immobile and have to become a state-supported cabbage for the rest of my life. But never mind. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run read-write test. Oh! There we go. So we found a problem straight away, and that is caused by a stability issue, which results in the DMA move in the SRAM on the cartridge failing and resulting in a bogus pointer to a non-existent file name in the list. So yes, the Side 3.1 still does not work stably in this machine, even after it went all the way to wherever it went to get the components completely bulldozed off the board, completely refitted with SRAM, an O2 fixer, and a completely fucked up PokeyMAX 2, and it's still not right. I can tell you straight away that should never happen on a machine that doesn't have a stability issue with Side 3.1. So there we go. So I was going to run read-write CRC on this machine. Well, I'm going to do it anyway, and we'll see what that brings. So yeah, so he still hasn't got a fully working machine. I now have to look at this issue and try and diagnose it. So this video is going to go on a little bit longer now. So we've fixed almost everything there is to fix on this machine, but the initial issue that the owner had back in 2023, which caused him to send this machine off in September of last year to get completely rebuilt, still isn't fixed, despite all that. Let's run this. While I'm waiting for RWCRC to complete, because it takes ages, sometimes I like to have a little play the guitar. Alright, so we're getting to the closing stages of the RW test now. I'm actually expecting it to complete without any errors, just because we're getting a DMA, RAM-to-RAM DMA copy error elsewhere in the loader doesn't mean that we can't manage a pass with read-write CRC. Even the issue with the file list won't be constant. That'll crop up in different places. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. It's a complete bloody nightmare to try and track this down. But having seen it once, we know there's a problem. Right, so what I've done initially, the O2 signal for the Ultimate 1 megabyte as the machine arrived here was sourced from the top pad of the O2 fixer down here. This is a pad specially reserved for Ultimate 1 megabyte. Now I did try this with a previous machine, NTSC 800XL, when I was trying to tidy up the stability on that one, and I did try exactly this. The same thing here. It was a piece of wire from the center pad on the O2 fixer up to this pin up here, which as per the instructions, and then I ran the O2 signal from there into the Ultimate 1 megabyte in that machine. And when I did that, I was getting FPGA not recognized error from the repeaters in that computer. So I didn't really pursue that line of approach or attack too much after that. So I've done that anyway, so I've made that change so that the Ultimate is now getting its O2 signal straight from the back of the adapters board, where there's a 4-pin header specially designed for the Ultimate 1 megabyte. So let's have a look. Now the trouble is with this, as I've just said to Candle, this is very, very, very difficult to determinately prove that there's any kind of difference when, since the RWCRC test passed without problems, trying to pinpoint whether a change like this has had any noticeable effect on the system is very, very time consuming. And specifically what's happening here anyway, the reason for that gap in the file list in the side 3 loader, I can explain exactly what's going on there. So what happens is, when this file list is built, it's reading the FAT directory, obviously in a linear fashion, in an unsorted fashion, and depending on what your preference is here, where are we? Sort by, so we can sort by name, type, size, date, time, or none. None being the files that be presented in the order that they appear in the directory on the disk. So anyway, this thing is managed. The data structure is actually an array of pointers. The pointer table is on the SRAM of the side 3 cartridge, and the actual directory data itself, the strings, which can obviously be up to 256 characters long or thereabouts. I mean, even that needs to be changed. Technically speaking, there's a limit of about 240. The way this is designed at the moment, so I've got to do a little bit more redesign to have a pointer in the data structure for each entry, which goes to a string, and then the string will be 256 bytes long if it needs to be. Anyway, each file name is read, we gradually build a table of pointers, which are pointers to the individual entries, and we use a binary search to find the correct position in the array to insert a new pointer to a new entry. So the entries themselves occupy about 8 banks of 8K SRAM in the side 3 cartridges SRAM, so that the directory can be up to 64K long. And one of the banks is, I think actually an extra bank, an extra 8K bank is used for the pointer table. So we use, to try and save a bit of a few cycles, make it a bit more efficient in the more recent versions of the loader, actually use a DMA RAM-to-RAM copy to open up a 2-byte gap in the pointer array, because obviously if the binary search finds that, let's say, the BXE folder needs to go at the beginning of the table, near the beginning, and there's already 2, 3, 4, 500 entries in the table, we need to move up all of those pointers by 2 bytes in the table, and that's what we use a DMA RAM to RAM copy operation for. So as far as I can tell, and I think this seems to be a sensible, well, the only plausible explanation, is that when we get a phantom entry which contains junk or it's blank, what appears to have happened there is that the DMA engine has done a RAM to RAM copy, moving all of the data in the table up by 2 positions, and during that copy something has got corrupted in that DMA RAM to RAM copy. Hence we'll get a bogus pointer to a directory entry that just contains junk, or it'll contain nothing at all, an empty string, all zeros, etc, etc. So what we need to do now is to try and establish whether changing that Phi2 signal source has made any difference whatsoever. So I'm going to be continually scrolling through the table to try and find errors in the directory list, because that's something we know we can reproduce at least. So we'll just page through it like this, looking for problems, and we'll page back up again, and we'll come back out again. Of course this is a different card, this isn't the owner's card, so what I really need to do is pop that card out and put his card in as well, see if we see any problems there. There's not much there, so we'll go in the COVOX folder, see if there's any problems there. So I'm not seeing any problems so far, and it didn't take me long to see problems, did it? With the other card, very quickly there was problems straight away. We had a blank entry in the directory. Now we haven't got a blank entry in the directory, but of course, having made this change, what I then need to do is try the COVOX files again, run rwcrc again, see if we've introduced another problem by actually fixing one problem, which is often the case. I'm going to go one step further here just for the sake of interest, and I'm going to pull out I'm going to disconnect and remove the O2 fixer entirely for a moment. I'll just have to, where I'm going to put it so it's not going to, I don't really want to drag it completely out of the system. I'm just going to tuck it in for a minute, hopefully it doesn't touch anything. And I'm going to replace the O2 fixer with this, which is a bog standard Motorola, is it a Motorola? I don't know, MC74F08N chip, which is my go-to chip for stabilizing side and repeaters, etc, etc. And this was probably the chip, I'm pretty sure this chip will have been in the machine when I first sent it back to the owner nearly 2 years ago. So anyway, but of course then he had a side 3, and I didn't observe any problems with the side 3 cartridge, but of course now he's got this, which is a side 3.1. So let's see if we can get a boot. I mean, that might have affected the repeaters, it would have affected all sorts of things. Oh, let's have a look. Alright, so the machine boots, we're in repeaters classic mode, don't forget. We're going to go into the, I mean, has the clock reset itself? No. Let's go into the loader, see what's happening there. Oh, well, the loader runs. Has the loader clock reset itself? No. Can we spot any problems in the file list? As far as I can tell. Can we replicate any problems playing back COVOX files? I'll probably have to mute this or abridge it or redact it in some way, because I'm bound to get a copyright strike. Jimi Hendrix. Ooh, that sounds good. Voodoo Child. We'll let that play for a bit, but I'll have to mute it. Right, where are we here? So yeah, that tune played to completion. It'd be nice to actually have a. Why have I not put a elapsed time and remaining time indicator on that player? That would be a nice thing to have. You'd have to estimate the time remaining, the length of the track, but you could do that, I suppose, using some fixed point mathematics, which I've already infests this thing. Right, so can we say that Voodoo Child played back to completion there, mono COVOX file? So I'm just going to have to sit and play with this for hours and hours and hours and hours, doing all sorts of things on it until such time as I identify a problem. So where are we with this machine now? Well, when I built it, it was used with a side 3, and apparently it was not problematic when it came to playing back music files, as the owner seems to like to do. Then the side 3 cartridge got eaten by a dog, and he bought a side 3.1 cartridge. That's when his problem started. He went to the third party. The third party said, oh, you need the O2 fixer. That's what you need. You need the SRAM and you need the O2 fixer. The third party got his hands on the machine. Instead of just putting the SRAM board in maybe and seeing how things went, because that's the state the machine's in now. Basically it's as it was, with the Ultimate in a different position and the SRAM board in. No O2 fixer. So instead of doing that, he just bulldozed the entire board, started again, attacked it with a hot air gun, warped the board, wrongly wired up the PokeyMAX so that there was a buzz on the audio, put O2 fixer and SRAM in it. It's not even obvious that he switched the machine on after he'd finished, shipped it back to the owner, and obviously the owner wasn't entirely satisfied with the result. So now it's come here. I've fixed the most obvious issues. I've taken the O2 fixer out entirely, put an M74F08 chip in it, and it seems to have improved things. So if that proves to be the case, I think it's reasonable to assume, and I'm not going to assume this yet because I need to test that Repeaters hasn't been affected adversely by this change, etc, etc, etc. I could go on forever. I would have to live stream the next 5 or 6 days of my life to go through all the possibilities here. But of course any information that I find after the fact, I'll share it. But it would seem reasonable to conclude at the moment that it's possible that the machine is better off with this removed. So the first thing we did was disconnect the custom O2 signal from the Ultimate 1 MB, and we left the board in basically to function as if it were a 74F08 chip. We observed that the directory corruption appeared to go away. I can't conclude that it has gone away completely yet. I'm far too well experienced to just say, oh, well, it's fixed now, that's obvious. Well, it's not obvious that it's fixed now, but we haven't encountered that problem since we made that change. Likewise, I've now took the board out entirely, and I'm going to drag the thing clean out for the time being. We took the board out entirely, replaced it with a Motorola 74F08 chip, and tried it again. Not only is the problem that the user maintained that he kept encountering, which is crashing music playback, we can't observe that. I had a lot of difficulty reproducing that problem even with this in the board. I have to be honest, but it's very obvious that the owner was absolutely correct in asserting there was a problem, because if there was a problem with the directory list in the loader, it's almost 100% certain that there's going to be a problem somewhere else. So far, having removed this board, things might be a bit better, but I can't even conclude that until I've tested everything again and again and again and again. So I think this is a good time to draw it to a close here, because any more work that's done on this machine, whether we end up trying to clean the bottom of the case, get rid of the discoloration, whether I move this headphone jack by actually soldering it to the board, which I think I should do. Oh, and while I'm busy finding fault with this machine before we wrap up, when I had the machine initially, what I will have done as a part of a routine maintenance is to connect up the chroma output, which is left unconnected at the factory on the 800XLs, and I'll connect that to this pin from this location using a 100 ohm resistor, which is absolutely standard practice, if you have a look at Brian's quick and simple video mod for the 800XL and almost every other video mod for the 800XL, which includes a chroma hookup, it will specify that you use a 100 ohm resistor to get the correct saturation level on the chroma. But in this case, the third party has decided to take that wire off that I put on here. Nothing could be left alone. So the intention appears to have been to completely purge the machine of any trace of the original work. So he took a wire off that I'd put on here, replaced it with a nice green one here. It's very nice. It matches the green of the PCB beautifully. It complements it very nicely indeed. But unfortunately he's put a diode on here instead of a 100 ohm resistor. So the diode may actually serve some useful function. I don't know whether it's designed to get rid of AC or what have you. I've put diodes in video mods that I've been playing with before. It's not unheard of. You can even get video cables that have got diodes in them. So he's put this diode in here, but the trouble is there isn't a resistor there. So yeah, I mean it's really bright. So what? There should be a 100 ohm resistor there. There's a reason you put a 100 ohm resistor in here. I don't know, but yeah, or the original 100 ohm resistor had to be deemed to be wrong in some sense, I don't know. But anyway, and the other thing is the 5 volt wire going to the PBI connector, which I'm pretty sure I put on, but it would have been grey if I'd put it on, of course. That was originally trapped underneath the cartridge pylon, such that the wire was getting squashed and the cartridge pylon wanted to jump out of its little clip here. So what I've done is I've simply moved that wire backwards out of the way of the cartridge pylon, so it doesn't get squashed anymore and the cartridge pylon can sit quite securely in its little slots. What was the fucking point of moving this so it was underneath the cartridge pylon? The shielding wasn't going to go back on the machine, so that served no purpose whatsoever. And there's still a bit of a glitch on this machine, and this, I can promise you, was happening from time to time previously, before I removed the O2 fixer. And it's something to do with the ribbon cabling over here, I think, because if I work this and fiddle along with it, it tends to go away. Something's not sitting properly on this board. So there you go. Yeah, so there's a bit more work to do there as well. So yeah, I lifted the lid there, pushed down on a few things and rebooted the machine, and now it's come up. It's working fine now. Have you got any gaps in the file list yet? Not yet. So anyway, still a bit more work to do on that. I think what I'll do now is I'll replace the ribbon cables, the MMU cable and the OS-ROM cable and the repeaters interconnect cable, and hopefully we can get rid of that glitch as well. Because the machine as it came back, as it arrived here, was just a mess. But anyway, I hope you found that one interesting and entertaining. I certainly found it interesting and entertaining at stages. Just every single thing I've tried to do here since I moved into this house and started to attack the work queue that's built up, every single job, even if it was just meant to be like a 2 or 3 hour quick fix, has just turned into an absolute epic. The first job I did, which I didn't even film, which I'm rather regretful I didn't film, resulted in me replacing the FPGA and the SRAM on a VBXE with no video output before I actually finally figured out it was the digital analog converter, and I replaced that. I ordered one from AliExpress, put it on the board and fixed it. So that would have been a good one, but never mind. But every single one that's come out, what are we now, 3 jobs into it? 3 jobs into the year, and also I got rid of the XEGS that had been sitting here for months on end, and even that one apparently has got an issue, something to do with the VBXE video output. But I don't think it's caused by the fact I forgot to put the shrink tubing on the back of the connector. God, no. But I'll sort that for him if it is. I think it's something to do with the upscaler. But I'm watching that situation very closely indeed. But yeah, that's what happens when you have to keep the machine for 5 or 6 months while you're waiting for the Yaki firmware to get fixed. But there you go. But yeah, every single one has just been an absolute saga. But I hope that it makes for an interesting video, because if the video is just me doing the same stuff again and again, fixing RAM problems or replacing the CPU on a broken Atari or sticking upgrades into it and it all works fine, I can't see why that would be particularly entertaining at this point in the game. But when you open the box and you find a machine and it gradually dawns on you that you actually built the thing 2 years previously and it's come back looking like this. Look, I want to thank new patrons. I think I've had a couple of new patrons and your names are going to be on the screen now. I really appreciate that. The first video of the year was very well received. Much more so than I expected, given the fact that it was an hour and a half long. I'm not naive enough to expect that that's necessarily going to continue, because it was probably a bit of a comeback video because I hadn't made anything for months and months on end. So obviously people are going to be a little bit curious as to what I'm actually doing and sort of the new working environment and stuff like that. That's fair enough. So I'm not getting too carried away, but I think this machine has been probably equally interesting as the last one, which was just an actual build from scratch. This machine's been around the block a few times now. Oh, yeah. So yeah, I really want to thank you very much indeed. The fact that video appears to have garnered 2 new patrons is very nice indeed. Very highly appreciated. As I appreciate everybody who looks at the videos and comments on them underneath and reacts with them and leaves a like, etc, etc. I'm not gonna lobby for please like and share every time. To me, it's a truism. It's an obvious thing. Every YouTube creator wants you to like it and interact with it and comment on it and share it and spread it all over the internet so that it goes viral and gets thousands and thousands of views. It's obvious that everybody would like that to happen, so it doesn't really make any sense to end every video with please like and share, please like and share. If you're gonna like it, if you're gonna share it, you're gonna watch it, it's up to you what you do. I can't make people watch stuff. So that's the way I look at it anyway. But of course it's very appreciated when something is well viewed. So yes, so I'll leave it there anyway before I waffle on any further. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. I want to thank the people who helped me as well. It's always nice to have people like Candle and Foft on hand when I'm stuck with something. Very much appreciated indeed. And I want to thank Latharek for the package that he sent with the new Aki boards and such in it. So that's great. So hopefully I didn't leave anybody out. And thanks to the owner of this machine for sending it in. And thanks to the third-party tech who worked on the machine after I did for creating such an absolutely highly dramatic and amusing situation. So with that, I will thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. And until then, goodbye for now.